Hi, today we are going to talk about Canadian economy, 25 billion oil pipeline that could make or break Canada's economy. Canada is the world's fourth largest oil producer, but 98% of its crude is shipped to the US. But for the first time ever, this 733-mile pipeline expansion is finally bringing Canadian oil to new buyers across the ocean. It basically changes the game for the entire industry here. But critics argue that investments into a steady oil industry hamstring the Canadian economy. Canada's boom could also be a bust for the American refiners who have grown used to that cheap, plentiful oil. Here's what at stake for the automatically over budget Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion and what it could mean for Canada's global ambitions and the world energy markets. Who wants this? The oil and the gas industry represents about 5% of Canadian GDP. The energy sector is one of the only industries in Canada that is growing. 95% of country's oil is produced here in Western uh, Canada. It's home to Alberta's oil sands, where uh, producers pump out millions of barrels of thick tar like oil every day, but most of that oil ends up just across the border, mainly in the Midwest instead of the global markets. For a long time, Canada was happy to send its oil to the US. It's a huge market that has unstable demand for energy. That created a relationship where each country relied on the other. Nearly all of the Canada's oil exported to its neighbor, and that oil makes up 60% of the U.S. imports. Pipeline advocates say that the heavy reliance on a single market has put down Canadian crude prices for years. Right now, most of the world's increasing demand is going to come from Asia. Canada has been trying to get its oil to those markets for a long time. The problem, Alberta is here in the middle of the country and hundreds of miles away from the either coast. The original Trans Mountain pipelines, first built in 1953, was the only pipeline bringing oil from Alberta to the west coast. So in 2013, energy company Kinder Morgan filed an application to expand its capacity. At that time, it was estimated to cost almost $4 billion, but the project stalled for years, facing intense opposition from environmental and indigenous groups as well as mounting costs. In 2018, the Canadian government stepped to finish it buying the pipeline from Kinder Morgan. The project was ambitious, aiming to open up exports to a new market in Japan, China, and India. By transporting more oil to a newly expanded Westridge Marine Terminal near Vancouver, it included almost 120 miles of reactivated pipeline, 19 new storage tanks, and three new shipping berths, all to triple the pipeline's capacity to ship nearly 900,000 barrels a day. In the end, it cost the government 25 billion to build, more than six times the original estimates. That's always a big mistake when the private sector says this is too risky a project. Circumstances have changed. We don't think we want to build this. The government and the taxpayers should not come along. And okay, we build it instead. Thomas Gunton has analyzed the cost and the benefits of the project, like the expansion of for decades. He estimates that taxpayers are subsidizing the cost for the project up to $14.9 billion. A spokesperson for the Canadian Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, in a statement, he said that the expansion will ensure Canada and Canada will receive fair market value for its resources, adding that the Bank of Canada estimates that will contribute to 0.25% of the Canadian GDP. The project promising big returns for Canada, making up 2.7 billion. That is making up 2.7 billion in lost revenue. So Canada's growing oil sector faced a strain on the country's export infrastructure. Production increased now with 600,000 barrels of increased capacity a day on the expanded pipeline. Oil producers are shipping their product directly to markets including China and India. When we talk about geopolitics, that's been a blow to American refiners who have been used to abundant access to discounted Canadian oil. In June, Phillips 60C, for example, one of the big refiners with a lot of refiners in the West Coast and the Gulf, said that the margin have been squeezed a little bit because of a sudden they have less access to Canadian oil than they used to. In a comment, Phillips 66 said that it had great flexibility in its system that can move oil into the refiners at the right time, and this shift could send ripple effects to consumers in the Middle West. Some experts expect refiners to pass higher crude costs along to customers at the pump. Better oil prices and more customers outside of the US also mean a bigger geopolitical role for Canada. Canada's access to the global market also gives the country a little bit more clout globally than it ever had before. Now, all of a sudden, Canada does have some position and some ability to kind of sway market where they can do something. But the expansion is not guaranteed to wean Canada off the US entirely. Thanks to its geographic isolation, the US will always be its number one customer. The easiest way out of this quandary would be for Canada to build more pipelines to its coast, but the prospect to another pipeline being built in Canada, it's unlikely. That's partly because of heavy opposition from environmental and First Nation groups. Trudeau, whose approval rating has slipped, came under fire for the support for the pipeline expansion at the same time as he pushed to fight climate change. Canada wants to be a climate leader and has implemented a number of policies and the international commitments to reduce by 40 to 45% its greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. Now, the biggest contributor to emissions is, of course, the oil and gas sector in this country. The greenhouse gas emission from all of the increased oil production and transportation will make it oil demand itself will rise by the end of the decade. Um, Let's take the example of coal. People have been expecting coal to be phased out as people reduce the use of coal for producing power of what the world is using more coal right now than it ever has in industry. The same is that it will be the same for the oil. And thanks for being with me. Thanks for watching. Thank you.